but the end of the week she would distribute the paychecks. Now, you know about my mother, she was an immigrant, she was a good woman, she worked. When they gave you the paycheck, Bob, I don't think you know this story.
I don't.
Huh?
No, I don't. Tell me.
So
Well, the paycheck.
You got it with the paycheck. They gave you a paycheck. I remember what it was because I got one. And the paycheck was about this long, like that. And it had paid to the order of Antonetta Carnevale, and it was signed, and there was an amount. Now, right next to it, there was an equal piece of paper like that. It had written down, that's when they started Social Security numbers, and you had to take out for Social Security and whatever else was on there. But they were very, very similar. Now, to someone like my mother who's an immigrant, right? You tear it in half, and they said, what do? You bring this to the bank. What bank? In Orneville was the Old Stone Bank, or the Columbus Bank. That was up in Federal Hill. And then they had the Industrial. That was the Industrial Bank.
That became Fleet.
Became
Fleet. Bank of America.
Became all that. But anyhow, so my mother, she got paid. Now, they all got paid, no paymaster, but everybody would rush to the Old Stone Bank, and they were in a big line to go get, well, they wanted the money. They couldn't buy groceries with that piece of paper. But they explained to them, this is where you get your money. Go to the Old Stone and give it to them. They went over there, and she learned with time that you had to turn it over and sign your name. And that we were talking about them reading and writing. My mother's name was Antonetta Carnevale. It wasn't Mary Smith, short name, big long name. And she didn't write it so small, but so she used to have to put Antonetta on top, Carnevale underneath. And it was tough to get her to consolidate that. But she did. She went there and she'd sign Antonetta Carnevale.
Tell them what Pudid means.
What?
Pudid. Tell them what Pudid means.
Pudin?
Pudid.
Pudid.
How much do I get Pudid?
Oh, Polito.
Oh, Bolito.
Polito.
Sorry.
That's clean. How much do I get clean? Don't spill that.
He doesn't know what that means.
That's clean. Polito means queen. Whenever you negotiate with someone, and that was continued when they got sales tax. Ma bulid, one day bulid. How much is it? How much is something?
You told me a story about Papa.
No, let me finish this
Okay.
one. So, my mother goes to the Old Stone Bank, and she's lined up a lot of women, and she tears it in half, right? And she puts the stub in her pocket. She turns the other one over and writes Antonetta Carnevale, gives it to the teller. She takes it, $22.10, and she give her the $22.10, which was her pay for the week. Pulida, that means after all deductions, right? How much that's simple enough, right?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of women in line. My mother's there. She did the same thing. She turned it over, gave it to the teller. Now, there's the teller is supposed to have some brains, right? She's passing it to her. She gives it to her. She looks at it. All right, bang, $22.10. She gives it to my mother. My mother leaves. She's happy. Everything is good. She goes to work Monday morning. Mr. Bittner, the old German guy, was a nice guy. I worked for him, I know. Nice guy. Mr. Bittner. Mr. Bittner. The girl come over. Antonetta, Mr. Bittner wants to see you. What did I do wrong? Am I losing my job? They didn't want to lose their job. Mr. Bittner, go to the office. So my mother went to the office. She went in. She said, you gotta wait, Mr. Bittner's coming. So when Mr. Bittner came, he said to her, Antonetta, I can just hear it in my head right now. He used to refer to her. Antonetta, what did you do? Mr. Bittner, I didn't do nothing. You tell me, I did my job, I do the best. You know I work out. Yes, I know. What did you do when you went to the bank? I didn't do nothing. I gave them the check. They gave me $22. I went home. I bought the grocery. You gave them the check? Yeah. Where is the other piece that you have? I got that at home. Well, you bring that here tomorrow. Okay, Mr. Bittner, I'll bring it tomorrow. Went home, she got it, she brought it, she cashed the stub. That's the only person in the world that I know.
She endorsed the stuff too.
That the woman in the bank cashed the stub. And my mother still had the check.
So Bittner wanted his $22 back.
Well, no, they bounced it.
Yeah.
They bounced it, sent it back, and the officer says, what happened?
I never heard that story.
How do you never heard that? The only person I ever know that cashed the stub was my mother. What do you want to know about my father?
No, about how when you had a job, and they said, you're going to get $35 a week for this job. And he says, okay, what do I get? I thought it was Pulid.
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 Polito. Polito.
Polito. What am I going to get? Because he didn't care, $35. You get a job, they're giving you $10 an hour. They don't give you $10 an hour. They give you $8 an hour. But because what do? They take out this for income tax and this for TDI and this. If you want to know how much Pulid, that's the 20.
We got to my family. We didn't get to me too much, Bobby.
I know.
Are you tired of listening to all this?
No.
Okay.
No, I think we're done. Thank you.
So what happened, Bobby, while I was in high school? Something going on out there?
I don't know.
Oh, I'll have one of those. Thank you. What happened, in those days, there was a mentality. The mentality was work. Work means earnings. Earnings means money. You can get ahead if you got some money. You can pay your bills. I grew up in the middle of the Great Depression. People didn't have money. That's where this all came about. There's certain things that get ingrained in you. Even now, my wife scolds me. I can't just spend money. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. You say, why not? You got money. I know. I could go out and blow $300, not even blink an eye. But I can't do it, Bobby, because of what's built in my brain. In the Great Depression, that was back in, I remember I was born in 1927. The Great Depression started after 1929, 1930, 31, 32, 33, 34. Those were tough days. People didn't have a job. They couldn't go to work. They couldn't earn any money. You follow me? They'd leave. They get up in the morning before daybreak. They get ready, go out, ready to work for the day. And they go to various places where they thought somebody might hire them for the day, not to get a job. If you had a job where you worked all week and you were the king, let me tell you, my uncle Michael Tommaso was one of the lucky ones. What happened is his brothers were older than he, and when they came, they went to work as laborers, but somehow they worked for New England Tel, putting in telephone poles and doing that, but still doing manual labor, but they got in. So when my Uncle Mike came, his brothers, they got him working for the New England Tel, putting in telephone poles, doing this, doing that. He had a job, and New England Tel, he worked during the whole Depression. You know what I mean? And he had money. He was like the king. Everybody else didn't have any. There were few people that never suffered with the...
Didn't Minuch have a job?
What?
Didn't Carl Minuch, Uncle Minuch? He had a job too, right?
Atlantic Mill.
Who's the elevator guy? Who had the elevator in the Biltmore? Wasn't there somebody in the family that ran the elevator? I thought it was Minuch.
No, I got my father a job running the elevator in the Turk's Head building.
That was later, way later.
That was way later. But during the Depression, people would go out in the morning. It was common. and they go look for a job. If they were lucky, somebody would hire them for the day. If they were unlucky, they just trudge back home afternoon time, because who's going to hire you afternoon time, right? And they didn't get a job today, and they'd struggle with what they had. People didn't have money, Bobby.
Someone's knocking on the door.
Right.
So were you? Henry was born during the Great Depression.
No, that's when we were coming out of it.
Oh.
What's going on out there?
Oh, I thought I heard someone knocking on the door. No? Okay.
My mother was a good textile worker, but they had no work in the mills either. But whenever they did, she'd go down and keep it, and sometimes she'd get hired for 1 or 2 days to do certain work, and she'd do that. My father went out; he was a hard worker, and there were people that were putting in sidewalks, and he'd go and see if they'd hire him for the day. And if someone was late showing up for work or something, and my father was there, says, "Can you use me for the day?" And the guy had put him to work. They used to tell the story about Gabino, Mike Gabino. You know, big contract. He was a wise guy, right? And he always walked around, and he had a bunch of 50-cent pieces in his pocket. 50 cents. He was just a wise guy, you know. And they were. Am I on TV?
You're good.
And
Wise guys.
he would go around where they were doing some work, and he'd just walk around. And if he saw a guy lean on the shovel for 10 minutes, he'd say, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm not doing nothing." Boom! He'd flip him 50 cents and go home. And people hated him. But that was Mike Gabino. Okay? People lived with that. They didn't have any money. So how did they manage during this depression? They used to go out, and there were people in these communities like Federal Hill where they knew all the people. Remember I explained paisans to you? What's a paisan, Bobby?
So that when the family all comes together and lives in the same area, one person that
people
lets you
from the same village.
Same village in Italy. Yeah.
They were good friends. Well, usually one of the paisans had a little grocery store, and if you went to him, you had no money. You needed food, and they used to have a book, and they'd put your name on the book, and you go in and you'd buy $2 worth of groceries, and he'd write you down $2 in the book, and he was giving you groceries on credit, and you had food to eat, and when you went to work, you got some money. You went in next week. If there was part of your money, the first thing my mother and father always did as an infant, I remember it, and these things get ingrained in you. The first thing they did when they put money aside for the rent. They had to pay the rent for the apartment. Otherwise you get kicked out. You can't sleep on the street. So the first thing they did was to make sure they had a roof, and they put money aside for that. If they had enough just to pay the rent, they borrow from the merchant and on the book to buy food to feed you. That's how terrible it was, Bobby. And but eventually, then what people would do, they had money, they'd go to the grocer, he had $2 on the book, he'd say, "I can give you $1, but I need more groceries." So you'd give him $1, he'd give you another $2 worth of groceries. So now you owed him $3, right? And you talked to your grandma. She worked for her grandfather who had a little store, and he used to do that with people. And your grandmother can tell you about people that come in on the book. They used to call it on the book. Now, you know, that's the way we lived, Bobby. So this went
Grandma used to
on.
give him too much, though. Grandma used to give him he only wanted a pound of chicken. You gave him a pound and a third.
In about 1934, 1935, it got so that people started to get jobs, started to get work. But I was about 6 years old, 6 and 7 years old. That was the heart of the Depression. It was awful.